The woman with the scar didn't come to buy a gun. She came to die. When Mara Vale walked into that frontier gun shop on a frozen Tuesday morning, she knew exactly who was coming for her, and she'd spent 14 years preparing for it. This isn't a story about heroes. It's about what happens when revenge stops being about justice and starts being the only thing keeping you alive. Stay with me until the end of this tale, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Mara's story travels. The bell above Silas Boone's gun shop door made a sound like a coin dropping into a well. Small, cold, final. It was the kind of bell that announced customers during pleasant hours, back when the frontier still pretended to be civilized. Now it just counted bodies. Mara Vale stepped inside and the warmth hit her face like a slap. Her boots tracked mud across the clean floorboards, each step deliberate, measured. The scar running from her left temple down to her jaw caught the lamplight, a pale, twisted line that pulled her mouth into something that might have been a smile if you didn't know better. 3 men stood near the potbelly stove in the corner. Young ranch hands, probably no more than 22 or 23, with soft hands and loud mouths. They'd been laughing about something when she walked in. The laughter died, but the smirks didn't. "Well, hell," one of them said. He had red hair and freckles that made him look even younger than he was. "Looks like someone already got to you, ma'am." His friend snorted. The taller one, lanky, with a weak chin, added, "That's some decoration you got there. Your husband do that before he ran off?" Mara didn't look at them. She moved 3 steps to her left, positioning herself where she could see the door, the front window, and the narrow hallway leading to the back room. Her right hand stayed loose at her side. Her left adjusted the collar of her coat, casual, like she was just getting comfortable. "Tom, shut your damn mouth," the voice came from behind the counter. The back room door swung open and Silas Boone emerged carrying a rifle case. He was 60 if he was a day, built like a fence post, with a beard more gray than brown and eyes that had seen enough to stop finding most things interesting. But when he saw Mara, those eyes went wide. The rifle case hit the counter with a thud. "Jesus," Silas said, then caught himself. Silas." Mara's voice was quiet, rough around the edges, like she didn't use it much. "Mara Vale." He said her name like he was confirming something he'd hoped wasn't true. 14 years. 13 and change. The red-haired kid looked between them, confused. "You know this woman?" Silas ignored him. He moved around the counter slowly, hands visible, nothing threatening. When he got closer, Mara saw the tremor in his fingers. Not fear, age maybe, or memory. "The blizzard winter," Silas said. "You pulled 50 men out of a whiteout and got them to shelter. Then you disappeared before anyone could thank you proper." "Didn't need thanks." "You needed something. You took my Springfield rifle and every round of ammunition I had in stock." Silas's jaw worked. "Never saw a payment for that. You'll get it today." Something in her tone made the temperature in the room drop. The ranch hand stopped smirking. The tall one actually took a step back toward the stove. Silas studied her face, not the scar, but her eyes. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. "You're not here to shop," he said. "No." "You're waiting for someone." "Yes." "And when they get here, there's going to be trouble." Mara finally looked at the 3 young men by the stove. They shuffled, uncomfortable under her gaze. "These boys friends of yours?" she asked Silas. "Customers. They were just leaving." The red-haired one bristled. "We were here first." "Tom." Silas's voice went hard. "Take your friends and get out of my shop. Now." "The hell we will. This is public." Mara moved. Not fast, not threatening. She just shifted her weight and let her coat fall open enough to show the Colt revolver on her right hip and the longer barrel of a second gun tucked into a shoulder rig. Both weapons showed wear, the kind that comes from use, not decoration. Tom's protest died in his throat. "We were just going anyway," the tall one said quickly. He grabbed Tom's arm. "Come on." They headed for the door, trying to maintain some dignity. The third one, shorter, darker, hadn't said anything yet, paused with his hand on the door handle. "Ma'am," he said quietly, meeting her eyes. "Whatever happened to you, I'm sorry folks made light of it." Mara's expression didn't change, but she gave him the smallest nod. Then they were gone, and the bell chimed again, and it was just her and Silas in the shop. The old man locked the door behind them, flipped the sign to closed. When he turned back, his face had aged another 10 years. How long? He asked. He'll be here at noon. Silas pulled out his pocket watch. Nearly 11:30. That's not much time. It's enough. For what? Mara, if you're planning what I think you're planning, I'm not planning anything. She moved to the counter, running her hand along the glass case displaying pistols. I'm just going to be here. What happens after that isn't really up to me. The hell it isn't. Silas came closer, lowering his voice like the walls might be listening. You're talking about a gunfight. In my shop. On a Tuesday morning. Tuesday afternoon, technically. Don't be smart with me, girl. He caught himself, adjusted. I mean, you're not a girl anymore. Neither of us is young, but that doesn't mean we're ready to die. I've been ready for 14 years. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Silas leaned against the counter, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. Tell me it's not about those Harker boys. Mara's hand stopped moving along the glass. Tell me, Silas repeated, that you didn't spend 14 years hunting down the men who killed your husband, and that this isn't about the last one finally hunting you back. When she didn't answer, he swore. It was creative and heartfelt. How many were there? He asked. 4 brothers. 3 of them are dead. Your work? My work. Silas rubbed his face with both hands. And the 4th one, the one coming here, he's the youngest, isn't he? Cal Harker. You know him? I know of him. Everyone on the frontier knows of him by now. He's not like his brothers, Mara. They were mean, stupid, vicious. Cal's different. He's patient, smart. They say he can track a ghost across stone and shoot the wings off a fly at 200 yards. I know what he can do. Mara touched her scar without seeming to realize it. We've met before. And you're still alive. That means he let you live. He made a mistake. Or he wanted you to suffer. Silas moved around to his side of the counter, started unlocking drawers. How'd you even know he existed? The Harker brothers were Owen, Clay, and Silas. Wait, there was a 4th? There was a 5th, Mara corrected. Nobody knew about Cal. He was younger, maybe 10 or 11 when his brothers rode with their gang. They kept him hidden, sent him east to school. By the time Owen, Clay, and Silas started their killing spree out here, Cal was learning mathematics and philosophy in Boston. Doesn't sound like outlaw material. He wasn't, not then. Mara accepted the glass of whiskey Silas poured without asking. She didn't drink it, just held it. But when word reached him that his brothers were dead, all killed by the same woman, he came west. Took him 2 years to find me. When he did, she trailed off, touching the scar again. He gave you that, Silas said quietly. We met outside Tempe. I was tracking a lead on some cattle rustlers. Didn't know he was behind me until his knife was already moving. He's fast, Silas, faster than anyone I've ever seen. He put that scar on my face and had his gun to my head before I could even reach mine. But he didn't kill you. No, he told me his name, told me what I'd done to his family. Then he told me that killing me quick would be too kind. He wanted me to know he was out there. Wanted me to spend every day looking over my shoulder, wondering when he'd come back to finish it. Silas drank his own whiskey in one swallow. That was what, 2 years ago? 23 months. He's been waiting, letting me twist in the wind. Then 3 days ago, I got a letter. It was addressed to me at the boarding house in Silverton where I'd been staying. Inside was just one sentence. Tuesday, noon, Boone's gun shop. He wants an audience. He wants it to mean something. Your shop is where I bought my first gun after... Mara paused, chose her words. After my husband died. Cal must have tracked down every place I've been, every step of my hunt. He knows the whole story. And he wants to end it where it started. Yes. Silas poured himself another whiskey, drank it slower this time. You could run. I'm done running. You could have the law waiting here instead of... There's no law between here and Silverton that would stand up to Cal Harker. And even if there was, this isn't their fight. It's not yours either, not anymore. Silas's voice went gentle. Mara, you got the men who killed Thomas. 3 out of 4 brothers are dead because of you. That's more than most widows ever get. Cal wasn't even there that night. He was a kid in school, learning poetry or whatever the hell they teach back east. He's not responsible for what his brothers did. He's responsible for what he's doing now. Which is what? Coming here to face the woman who killed his family? That doesn't make him a criminal. It makes him human. Mara finally drank the whiskey. It burned going down, but it was good burn. Real. His brothers weren't just outlaws, she said quietly. They were monsters. What they did to Thomas... Her voice caught. She forced it steady again. They didn't just kill him, Silas. They made it slow, made it hurt, and they laughed the whole time. I know. No, you don't. She set the glass down hard enough to crack. Nobody knows except me, because I'm the one who found him. I'm the one who held him while he died. And I'm the one who heard him make me promise that I wouldn't let them get away with it. Silas said nothing. So I learned to track, Mara continued. I learned to shoot. I learned to survive in country that kills men twice my size, and I hunted them. Owen first. I found him in a whorehouse in Tucson. He didn't even recognize me. Clay was harder. Took me 8 months to corner him in the mountains outside Santa Fe. Silas Harker, named after you, funny enough, he knew I was coming, put up a real fight, but they all went down. And that should have been enough. It was, until Cal decided it wasn't. The shop fell quiet except for the ticking of a clock on the wall and the faint whistle of wind through the eaves. Outside, the November sun climbed toward its zenith, pale and cold. Silas watched Mara's face, reading the lines that weren't just from the scar. You're not afraid of him. No, you're afraid of what you've become. That hit home. Mara's jaw tightened. 14 years, Silas said. 14 years of nothing but revenge. That's a long time to be angry, Mara. Long enough that maybe you don't know how to be anything else anymore. I know how to keep a promise. Thomas is dead. He doesn't care about promises anymore. I care. Do you? Or is this just the only thing you have left? Before Mara could answer, the back door creaked open. Both of them turned, hands moving toward weapons, then relaxing when they saw who it was. An old man stepped into the shop, moving with the careful economy of someone who'd lived too long to waste motion. He was native, Lakota maybe, or Northern Cheyenne, with long gray hair tied back in a face like carved wood. He wore trail clothes and carried a walking stick that probably doubled as a weapon. Gideon, Silas said, thought you were still up in the mountains. Was. Gideon Cross's voice sounded like rocks tumbling in a riverbed. Heard some interesting rumors in town. Figured I'd see if they were true. His eyes found Mara, studied her with the kind of attention most people reserved for rattlesnakes. Mara Vale, he said. It wasn't a question. You know me? Know of you. You're famous in certain circles. He moved to the stove, warming his hands. The ghost hunter, they call you. The woman who tracked the Harker gang across 3 territories and put them all in the ground. Not all of them. No, not Cal. Gideon glanced at Silas. That why you closed the shop early? She's expecting him at noon. Here? Here. Gideon absorbed this, nodded slowly. Makes sense. Poetic, even. Where it started, where it ends. He looked at Mara. You think you can take him? I think it doesn't matter anymore. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. The 3 of them stood in silence as the clock ticked toward 11:45. Outside, the town went about its business, unaware that in one small gun shop, the final chapter of a 14-year war was about to be written. Silas broke the silence first. There's still time to walk away, Mara. Both of you could. Nobody has to die today. Somebody always has to die, Gideon said quietly. That's how these things work. Not if they choose different. You ever known anyone to choose different when it came to blood debt? Gideon shook his head. No, this ends one way. Question is whether she's ready for it. Mara had been staring out the window, watching the street. Now she turned back to face them both. I've been ready since the day I found Thomas in our barn, with his throat cut and his hands nailed to the wall, she said. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, which somehow made it worse. The Harker brothers did that because he wouldn't tell them where we kept our savings. $73. That's what my husband's life was worth to them. Silas closed his eyes. So no, Mara continued, I'm not walking away. I'm not choosing different. I'm standing here until Cal Harker walks through that door, and then we're going to settle this the way it was always going to be settled. With guns, Gideon said. With whatever it takes. The old scout studied her another moment, then surprised everyone by smiling. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was genuine. You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago, he said. Woman named Sarah Two Knives. She lost her whole family to a cavalry raid, one of those unofficial ones where soldiers pretended to be bandits. Spent 10 years tracking down every man who'd been there. Got them all, too. What happened to her? Mara asked. She put a bullet in the last one's head, then put one in her own. Figured she'd done what she set out to do, and didn't have any reason left to keep breathing. The clock ticked. Wind rattled the windows. I'm not Sarah Two Knives, Mara said. No? No. I'm going to kill Cal Harker, and then I'm going to figure out what comes after. Gideon's smile faded. You already know what comes after, girl. Same thing that came after for Sarah. Same thing that comes after for everyone who lives for nothing but revenge. You think you'll just set down your guns and take up knitting? Think you'll find a nice man and settle down, maybe have some kids and bake pies? I don't know what I'll do. Because there is no after, not for people like us. We're already ghosts. We just haven't laid down yet. Gideon, Silas warned. But the old scout wasn't finished. He moved closer to Mara, his ancient eyes boring into hers. I can see it in you, he said. Same thing I saw in Sarah. Same thing I've seen in 100 other souls who traded their humanity for justice. You're hollow. You've been hollow so long you don't even remember what it felt like to be full. And you think killing Cal Harker is going to fill you back up, but it won't. It'll just make the emptiness permanent. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you. I was you 40 years ago. I hunted the men who killed my wife and children, got every single one of them. You know what I felt when I put a bullet in the last one? Mara didn't answer. Nothing, Gideon said. Not satisfaction, not peace, not even relief. Just nothing, and that nothing has been with me every day since. It's eating you too. I can see it. Then maybe I'm already dead, Mara said. Maybe I died 14 years ago in that barn with Thomas, and this is just my body finishing the job. Either way, Cal Harker's not walking out of here alive. Neither are you. The words fell like stones into still water. Silas moved between them, hands raised. That's enough, both of you. Gideon, you're not helping. Mara, he's right. Mara's voice was calm. I've known it for a while now. This was always going to be the end, one way or another. No. Silas's voice cracked. No, that's not. You can still choose to live, Mara. You can still walk out of here and build something new. It's not too late. It's been too late for 14 years. The clock struck 11:50. 10 minutes. Mara moved back to her position by the counter, checking her sight lines one more time. Gideon settled into a chair in the corner, his walking stick across his knees. Silas stood behind his counter, hands flat on the wood, looking like a man watching his house burn down. When this is over, Mara said quietly, everything in my saddlebag is yours, Silas. There's almost $300 there. Should cover what I owe you for the rifle and ammunition, plus compensation for whatever damage happens here today. I don't want your money. Take it anyway. Use it for something good. Something that matters. You matter, Mara. I mattered. Past tense. She checked her revolver, spun the cylinder, checked it again. Nervous habit. Now I'm just a ghost finishing her business. 5 minutes. The shop had gone completely still. Even the clock seemed to tick more quietly, as if the whole building was holding its breath. Then Gideon spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. He's here. Mara's head snapped toward the window. Silas followed her gaze. A man was dismounting from a horse across the street. Even from a distance, even through dusty glass, he cut an impressive figure. Tall, lean, dressed in black. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having lost a fight that mattered. Cal Harker. He tied his horse to the rail, taking his time. No rush. He knew exactly where he was going and who would be waiting. Last chance, Silas said. I can go out there, tell him you're not here, send him on his way. He'd know you were lying, Mara said. Her voice was steady, but her hand had drifted to her scar. And then he'd kill you to make a point. So what? I'm an old man. I've had my time. Your time's not up yet. Mara turned to face him, and for just a moment the hardness in her eyes softened. Thank you, Silas, for the rifle, for the ammunition, for not asking too many questions back then. You helped me when nobody else would. I helped you kill 3 men. You helped me keep a promise. Outside, Cal Harker checked his pocket watch. Then he started walking toward the shop. His boots made no sound on the frozen dirt street. He walked like water flowing downhill, inevitable, unhurried, impossible to stop. When he reached the door, he paused, his hand on the handle. Through the glass, Mara could see his face clearly for the first time in nearly 2 years. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 32, 33. Handsome in a sharp-edged way with dark hair and darker eyes. The kind of face that would look at home in a Boston drawing room or a frontier saloon. He met her eyes through the window and smiled. Not cruel, not mocking, just sad. The bell chimed as he opened the door and stepped inside. Cal Harker stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds before he moved, not hesitating, just taking inventory. His eyes swept the room with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned that the first man to understand a space usually walked out of it alive. He saw Mara first, positioned exactly where she needed to be. Then Silas behind the counter, hands visible but tense. Finally Gideon in the corner, so still he could have been furniture, except for the alertness in his ancient eyes. 3 against 1, Cal said. His voice was smooth, educated. Boston still clung to his vowels despite years out west. I'd call that unfair, but I suppose I deserve it. He closed the door behind him. The bell chimed again, and this time it sounded like a coffin lid closing. They're not part of this, Mara said. No? Cal's attention fixed on her completely now. Then why are they here? Because it's my shop, Silas said, and I'll be damned if I'm going to hide in the back while what? While we kill each other? Cal walked further inside, hands loose at his sides. He wasn't wearing his gun low like a fast-draw artist. It sat in a simple leather holster, positioned for practicality rather than speed. Is that what you think is going to happen here, Mr. Boone? Silas's jaw worked. I think that's what usually happens when people like you two end up in the same room. People like us. Cal's mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. You mean killers. I mean people with blood debts. Fair enough. Cal's gaze drifted to Gideon. And you, grandfather? Are you here to even the odds or just to watch? Gideon's weathered face remained impassive. Depends on what you came here to do, boy. What I came here to do. Cal repeated the words slowly, tasting them. His eyes returned to Mara. I came here to finish what started 14 years ago. Isn't that right, Mrs. Vale? The formality of it. Mrs. Vale, not Mara, not woman, not killer, hit harder than an insult would have. It acknowledged what she'd been before revenge hollowed her out. It's just Vale now, she said. I gave up the rest a long time ago. But you kept the name, Thomas's name. It's all I had left of him. That and the promise you made. Cal moved closer, angling toward the center of the room. Tell me, was it worth it? Spending 14 years becoming the thing you hunted? They killed my husband. My brothers killed your husband. I was 11 years old learning Latin declensions in a boarding school 3,000 miles away. Cal's voice remained level, but something cold flickered in his eyes. I didn't even know I had brothers until Owen sent me a letter when I turned 16. Did you know that? My mother sent me east when I was 6 because she didn't want me growing up around the kind of men my father and older brothers were becoming. Mara said nothing. I met them exactly twice, Cal continued. Once when I was 16 and Owen came to visit me at school. He bought me dinner, told me about life out west, tried to convince me to come home. I said no. The second time was at my mother's funeral 3 years later. Owen, Clay, and Silas were already outlaws by then, but they came anyway. We buried her together, and then they rode off. That was the last time I saw any of them alive. Where's the part where I'm supposed to feel sorry for you? Mara's hand hadn't moved closer to her gun, but it hadn't moved away either. You want me to believe you were some innocent bystander? You came after me, Cal. You hunted me down and put this scar on my face. That wasn't your brothers, that was you. Yes. Cal's voice went quiet. That was me. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Silas cleared his throat. Son, maybe. Don't call me son. You're not my father. Cal didn't look away from Mara. My father died in a mining accident when I was 4. My brothers died because the woman standing in front of me tracked them across 3 territories and shot them like dogs. And now here we are. Here we are, Mara echoed. You know what the funny thing is? Cal's laugh was bitter. I didn't even like my brothers. Owen was cruel. Clay was stupid. Silas was mean drunk more often than he was sober. But they were blood. That's supposed to mean something, isn't it? It means you share ancestors. Doesn't mean you owe them your life. No, but apparently it means I owe them revenge. Cal finally looked away from her, studying the guns displayed in the cases around the shop. I spent 2 years tracking you down after I heard what you'd done. 2 years asking questions, following trails, learning everything about you. Do you want to know what I found? Mara didn't answer. I found a woman who'd been a school teacher before she married Thomas Vale. A woman who could barely shoot a rifle when her husband was alive. A woman who, by all accounts, was kind and gentle and completely unprepared for frontier life. Cal ran his finger along the glass case. And then I found what she became after. The ghost hunter. The woman who could track game through solid rock and shoot a man's eye out at 100 paces. The killer who put my brothers in the ground without hesitation. They earned it. Did they? Cal turned back to face her. Owen and Clay, sure. They killed your husband. They laughed while they did it. That's what witnesses said anyway. But Silas? He wasn't even there that night. Mara's face went stone. You didn't know that, did you? Cal's voice softened dangerously. Silas was 200 miles away robbing a bank in Socorro. He had nothing to do with Thomas Vale's death. But you killed him anyway because his last name was Harker. He rode with them, Mara said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. He was part of the gang. He was. But he didn't kill your husband. Cal took another step closer. So tell me, Mrs. Vale, when you put a bullet through my brother Silas's heart, were you keeping a promise to your dead husband, or were you just killing anyone with the wrong name? The shop had gone deathly quiet. Even the clock seemed to have stopped ticking. Gideon spoke into the silence, his voice like gravel. Boy's got a point. Stay out of this, Mara said. Can't. I'm already in it just by being here. The old scout shifted in his chair. But he's right. If the third brother wasn't there that night, if he didn't have a hand in what happened, he was an outlaw, Mara cut him off. He'd killed other people, other husbands, other fathers. So it was justice then? Cal's laugh was sharp. You appointed yourself judge, jury, and executioner for crimes that had nothing to do with you? I was evening the scales. You were feeding your anger. There's a difference. Mara's hand finally moved toward her gun, just an inch. Cal saw it but didn't react. You want to draw on me? He asked quietly. Go ahead. That's why we're both here, isn't it? To finish this the only way people like us know how. I'm not like you. No. You've killed 3 men. I've killed 5. But at least I can admit what I am. Can you? I know exactly what I am. A widow keeping a promise? A hunter bringing killers to justice? Cal shook his head. Or just someone who needed the anger more than she needed peace? Silas slammed his hand on the counter. The crack of it made everyone jump except Cal and Mara. Enough, Silas said, both of you. This isn't solving anything. Nothing's going to solve this, Cal said. That's the point. She killed my brothers. I came after her. Now we're standing in a gun shop at high noon because that's what the story demands. Blood for blood. The eternal cycle. It doesn't have to be, Silas insisted. Doesn't it? Cal looked at him. You've been out here long enough, Mr. Boone. You know how these things end. Someone draws. Someone dies. Maybe both someones. And then it's over. And the survivors get to decide what it all meant. That's not the only way. It's the only way that makes sense, the only way that feels right. Cal's hand drifted closer to his gun, mirroring Mara's movement. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you can see another ending to this story. Silas opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't. Gideon watched from his corner, his walking stick still across his knees. Before you two start shooting, he said, I've got a question. Cal raised an eyebrow. Only one? The scar. Gideon nodded toward Mara's face. You gave her that, 2 years ago? Had her dead to rights, knife to her face, gun to her head, but you let her live. Why? Cal was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its edge. Because I wanted her to suffer. That's what you told her. I'm asking what's true. It is true. Bullshit! Gideon's voice cracked like a whip. You let her live because you weren't sure. Weren't sure she deserved to die. Weren't sure your brothers deserved to be avenged. Weren't sure about any of it. Cal's jaw tightened. You've spent 2 years since then trying to convince yourself, Gideon continued. 2 years working up the nerve to finish what you started. And even now, standing here with your hand on your gun, and nothing but air between you two, you're still not sure. You don't know what I'm feeling. I know exactly what you're feeling because I felt it too when I was your age. That gnawing doubt, that voice in the back of your head asking if maybe, just maybe, you're about to make a mistake that can't be unmade. Cal's hand moved away from his gun, just slightly, but enough to notice. Mara saw it. Don't listen to him. He's trying to save your life. Maybe he should try saving yours instead, Cal shot back. I'm not looking to be saved. Neither am I. But that doesn't mean... Cal stopped, frustrated. You don't get it. I didn't come here to be talked out of this. I came here because it's what I have to do. Why? Mara asked. Because they were your brothers? You said yourself you barely knew them, didn't even like them. Because someone has to pay, Cal said. And for the first time, real emotion cracked through his controlled exterior. Someone has to pay for what was taken from me. Your brothers are dead. They already paid. Not them. Me. Cal's voice rose. I lost my family. All of them. My mother died grieving sons who'd turned into monsters. My brothers died before I could even try to save them from themselves. And I lost... He cut himself off, breathing hard. Lost what? Silas asked gently. Cal's laugh was hollow. Her name was Elizabeth. We were going to be married, had the date set and everything, but then I got word about Owen's death, then Clay, then Silas, and I told her I needed to go west, needed to settle this thing. She asked me not to, said it would consume me, turn me into someone she wouldn't recognize. I told her she was wrong. He touched his own face, roughly where Mara's scar was on hers. She left me a week after I came back from Tempe, he said quietly. Said I'd already become the thing she'd feared. Said the man she loved wouldn't have cut a woman's face open, wouldn't have made her suffer just to prove a point. She was right. That man died somewhere between Boston and the frontier. Now I'm just... this. The shop was silent except for the wind outside and the faint creak of floorboards. Mara found her voice first. So you lost someone you loved. Welcome to the club. It's not the same, isn't it? You think you're the only one who gave up everything for revenge? I lost Thomas. Then I lost myself. 14 years I've spent becoming someone he wouldn't recognize. Someone I don't recognize. She touched her own scar. You gave me this thinking it would make us even, make us the same. And you were right. We're both ghosts, both hollow, both too far gone to find our way back. Then why are we still talking? Cal's hand moved back toward his gun. If we're both already dead, if there's no way back, then let's finish this. Draw, shoot, die. At least then it'll be over. It won't be over, Gideon said. It's never over. That's the whole damn point. What do you want from me, old man? Cal's control was slipping. You want me to walk away? Pretend this never happened? Go back east and marry some other woman and live a nice quiet life pretending I never had brothers who died screaming my name. They didn't die screaming your name, Mara said. Owen died quick, single shot to the heart. Clay took longer, gut shot, but I stayed with him, made sure he wasn't alone. She paused. Silas fought. Put 2 bullets in me before I got him. But his last words weren't about you. They were about a woman named Sarah who worked in a saloon in Tucson, said to tell her he was sorry. Cal's face had gone pale. You're lying. I'm not. I didn't know about you until you found me in Tempe. Your brothers never mentioned a younger sibling. They didn't die thinking about you, Cal. They died thinking about themselves. Shut up. You want the truth? Here it is. Your brothers were small, mean, selfish men who hurt people for money and laughed while they did it. They weren't tragic figures. They weren't misunderstood. They were just... I said, shut up. Cal's gun was in his hand before anyone could blink. Fast. Impossibly fast. The barrel leveled at Mara's chest. But Mara's gun was out too, just as quick. They stood facing each other across 8 feet of floor space, both weapons steady, both fingers on triggers. Silas had ducked behind his counter. Gideon had his walking stick up, ready to swing, though at whom wasn't clear. The moment stretched. Seconds became hours. "Do it," Mara said. Her voice was steady. "Finish what you started in Tempe. Put the bullet where it belongs." "You first," Cal replied. "Add me to your collection. 4 out of 4. Complete the set." Neither of them fired. "What's stopping you?" Mara asked. "What's stopping you?" "I asked first." Cal's gun hand trembled, just slightly, but enough. "I don't know. I stood here for 2 years planning this moment, rehearsing what I'd say, how it would feel to watch you die. But now," he trailed off. "Now you're not sure I'm the enemy," Mara finished. "Now you're starting to wonder if maybe we're both just victims of the same story. Different chapters, same ending. Maybe. That doesn't change anything. We can't both walk out of here. The story doesn't work that way." "Why not?" Silas's voice came from behind the counter. "Who says the story has to end the way you think it does?" "Because that's how it always ends," Mara said, still not taking her eyes off Cal. "Blood pays for blood. That's the rule." "The rule can change," Silas insisted. "You can change it, both of you." "Can we?" Cal's voice was raw. "I've spent 2 years becoming this. She spent 14. That's not something you just set down and walk away from." "Why not?" Gideon asked. "I did." Everyone looked at him. The old scout stood slowly, setting his walking stick aside. "I told you about my wife and children, about hunting the men who killed them. But I didn't tell you what happened after I got the last one." He moved closer, his weathered face grave. "I stood over his body in the middle of nowhere, covered in his blood and mine, and I waited to feel something, anything, relief, peace, satisfaction. But there was nothing, just empty. So I put my gun to my own head, figured I'd finish the job." His hand touched his temple, showing where the barrel would have rested. "Couldn't do it. Don't know why. Maybe I was too much of a coward. Maybe some part of me still wanted to live. But I lowered that gun and I walked away, found a bottle, then another, then enough to drown in, spent 5 years at the bottom before I climbed back out." He looked at both of them. "I'm not going to tell you it was worth it. I'm not going to say I found peace or meaning or any of that nonsense. But I'm still here, still breathing, and some days, that's enough." "Some days," Mara repeated. "What about the other days?" "The other days I remember what I lost, what I became, and I live with it because that's what living means, carrying your dead and keeping going anyway." Cal's gun lowered an inch. "That's supposed to be inspiring?" "It's supposed to be true. Inspiration is for people who haven't already waded through hell. You two don't need inspiration. You need permission." "Permission for what?" Mara asked. "To stop." Gideon's voice went gentle. "To put down the guns and walk away and let this story end differently than you planned. Because right now, you're both looking for a reason not to pull those triggers. I can see it in your eyes. But you need someone to tell you it's okay." "It's not okay," Cal said. "Nothing about this is okay." "No, but it can be over, if you let it." The guns were still out, still pointed at each other, but neither of them was shaking anymore. They'd gone still, frozen in a moment that could tip either way. Mara spoke first. "In Tempe, when you had your knife to my face, you told me that killing me quick would be too kind. I remember. Did you mean it, or were you just trying to convince yourself you were still the villain in this story?" Cal was quiet for a long time. "Both, neither, I don't know anymore." "Me either." Mara's gun lowered another inch. "I spent 14 years certain about everything, certain about who deserved to die, certain about what justice looked like. But standing here now, looking at you, all I feel is tired." "Tired," Cal repeated. "Tired of being angry. Tired of waking up every morning with nothing but revenge to live for. Tired of—" Her voice caught. "Tired of being the person Thomas's death turned me into." Cal's gun lowered to match hers. "Elizabeth told me something before she left. She said I had a choice. I could honor my brother's memory by becoming better than they were, or I could honor their mistakes by repeating them. She asked me which man I wanted to be." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I didn't have a choice, that blood demanded blood, that I owed my brother's vengeance." Cal's laugh was bitter. She told me I was a fool, and she was right. They didn't want vengeance. They were too dead to want anything. This was all me. My anger, my pain, my need to make someone pay for what I'd lost. And now? Mara asked. Now I'm standing in a gun shop with my finger on a trigger, about to kill a woman I don't even hate. About to become exactly what my brothers were. A killer justifying murder with family loyalty. He met her eyes. That's not honor. That's just more blood on top of old blood. And I'm so tired of blood. The guns lowered another inch, then another. Silas watched from behind his counter, barely breathing. Gideon stood motionless, his old eyes bright. If we don't finish this, Mara said slowly, what happens? You just ride back east? I go back to Silverton? We pretend we never met? I don't know. I haven't thought past this moment in 2 years. Me neither. 14 years planning for endings, never once thinking about after. Their guns were pointing at the floor now, still in their hands, but no longer aimed at each other. We could just walk away, Cal said. Right now, both of us. Just turn around and leave. Could we? I don't know. Can you? Mara looked at her gun like she was seeing it for the first time. It was an old Colt, worn smooth from use. She'd carried it for so long it felt like part of her hand. Setting it down would be like cutting off a finger, but maybe that was the point. If I walk away, she said quietly, Thomas doesn't get justice. Thomas is dead. He doesn't get anything anymore. Cal's voice was gentle. But you're still alive. You can still choose what comes next. Can I? After everything I've done? After 14 years of yes. The certainty in Cal's voice surprised them both. Because if I can choose, if someone like me can step back from this, then anyone can. Even you. Mara's hand shook. The gun felt impossibly heavy. I don't know how, she admitted. I don't know how, Cal slowly, carefully slid his gun back into its holster. I'm going to walk out that door. I'm going to get on my horse. And I'm going to ride away. What you do after that is your choice. But I'm done. I'm choosing to be done. He turned toward the door. Mara's gun came up. Everyone froze. Cal looked back at her. No fear in his eyes. Just resignation. If you're going to shoot me, he said calmly, do it now, while I'm looking at you. Don't put it in my back. The gun was aimed at his chest. Center mass. Impossible to miss at this range. Mara's finger was on the trigger. All she had to do was squeeze. The gun trembled in Mara's hand. Her finger pressed against the trigger, taking up the slack. One more ounce of pressure and Cal Harker would be dead before he hit the floor. 14 years had led to this moment. 14 years of tracking, hunting, killing. 14 years of waking up with Thomas's blood on her hands, even though she'd washed them 1,000 times. 14 years of being nothing but a promise wrapped in flesh and bone. And now that promise was looking at her with dark eyes that didn't beg or plead or show fear, just waited. Do it, Cal said quietly. If that's who you need to be, then do it. I won't blame you. Don't tell me what to do. I'm not. I'm just saying I understand. You've come too far to stop now. You've sacrificed too much. And maybe putting a bullet in me is the only thing that makes sense anymore. Mara's hand shook harder. The gun wavered. But it won't bring him back, Cal continued. Thomas is still going to be dead tomorrow morning, and you're still going to be alone. The only difference is you'll have 5 bodies instead of 4. Shut up. Make me. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Then Mara lowered the gun, not holstered it, not set it down. Just lowered it until it pointed at the floor again, her arm hanging loose at her side like all the strength had run out of her. I can't, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. I can't do it. Cal didn't move. Why not? Because you're right. Because it won't change anything. Because... She looked at the gun in her hand like it belonged to someone else. Because I'm tired of killing people who don't deserve it. My brothers deserved it. 2 of them did, but Silas? Maybe not. And you? Mara met his eyes. You didn't do anything except have the wrong last name and make bad choices about who to avenge. That's not enough. Not anymore. She finally holstered the gun. The movement felt wrong, like putting on someone else's clothes. Cal let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like hours. Thank you. Don't thank me, I'm not doing this for you. Mara's voice was rough. I'm doing it because if I pull that trigger, then Gideon was right. I'm already dead. Just a ghost going through the motions. And you don't want to be a ghost. I don't know what I want to be, but I know I don't want to be this anymore. She touched her scar, then dropped her hand. So go. Get on your horse and ride away. And if we ever see each other again, we're strangers. This conversation never happened. Cal nodded slowly. He turned back toward the door, his hand on the handle. Then he stopped. What happens now? He asked without turning around. For you, I mean, after all this. What do you do? I have no idea. Neither do I. He pulled the door open. Cold air rushed in. But I guess we'll figure it out. He stepped through the doorway, and Mara's voice stopped him one more time. Cal. He turned back. Your brother Silas. His last words about Sarah from the saloon in Tucson. That was true. But I didn't tell you the rest. Mara's face was unreadable. He also said to tell his little brother, he called you Charlie, said that was your name when you were small. He said to tell Charlie he was sorry for not being the man he should have been. Said he hoped you'd be smarter than the rest of them. Cal's composure finally cracked. His eyes went wet. He knew about me? They all did. Owen talked about you before he died. Said you were the only Harker who had a chance at a real life. Said he hoped I'd never find you. Mara's voice softened slightly. I lied before. They did think about you at the end. Maybe not the way you wanted, but they did. Cal stood in the doorway, caught between inside and outside, past and future. Why tell me this now? Because you should know, and because maybe it'll help you remember them as people instead of just names on a list. She paused. We both need to remember they were people. Flawed, broken, cruel sometimes. But still people. Were they worth mourning? That's not for me to say. I killed them. All I can tell you is what they said before they died. What you do with that is your choice. Cal wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. When he spoke again, his voice was steadier. The scar I gave you. In Tempe. What about it? I'm sorry, not because I'm afraid you'll shoot me, just, I'm sorry. It was a cruel thing to do. You deserved better than that, even if you had killed my brothers. Mara touched the scar again, tracing its path down her face. I've earned worse, but thank you for saying it. They looked at each other across the threshold. Two people who'd spent years building toward this moment and then choosing to step back from it at the last possible second. Goodbye, Mara Vale, Cal said. Goodbye, Cal Harker. He walked out. The door closed behind him. The bell chimed one final time. Through the window, they watched him untie his horse, mount up, and ride slowly down the street. He didn't look back. Within minutes, he was gone, swallowed by the gray November landscape. Mara stood frozen for a long moment. Then her legs gave out and she sat down hard on the floor, her back against the wall. The gun was still in its holster, but her hand kept reaching for it, muscle memory from 14 years of always being ready. Silas came out from behind the counter, moving slowly like he was approaching a wounded animal. You all right? No. Mara's laugh was shaky. I don't think I've been all right in 14 years. But you're alive. That counts for something. Does it? She looked up at him. What do I do now, Silas? I've spent so long being the ghost hunter that I don't remember how to be anything else. I don't know how to wake up in the morning without a target. Don't know how to exist without the anger. Silas lowered himself down to sit beside her, his old bones creaking. You learn. Same way you learn to track and shoot and survive. You just learn. I was learning those things for a reason. Had a goal. What's the goal now? The goal is tomorrow morning, then the morning after that, then the one after that. He looked at her scarred face with something like fondness. You don't need some grand purpose, Mara. You just need to keep breathing until breathing gets easier. Gideon had been silent throughout the exchange, still standing in his corner like a piece of the furniture. Now he spoke, his gravelly voice thoughtful. You know what the hard part is? He said. It's not letting them go. It's not putting down the gun or walking away from the fight. It's figuring out who you are when you're not angry anymore. Mara looked at him. How long did it take you? To figure out who I was? Gideon's smile was sad. Still working on it. Been 40 years and I'm still not sure. But I'm closer than I was. And some days, that's enough. That's the second time you've said that. Some days, that's enough. What about the days when it's not? Those days I just survive. Get through them however I can. Then I wake up the next morning and try again. He picked up his walking stick, ran his weathered hand along its length. That's all any of us can do, girl. Survive the bad days and appreciate the good ones when they come. Outside, the town was coming back to life. Voices drifted through the walls. A wagon rattled past. Someone laughed, the sound jarring in its normalcy. The whole town probably heard about this, Mara said. About Cal coming here. About us facing each other down. Probably, Silas agreed. Small towns, word travels fast. They'll want to know what happened, why we didn't kill each other. Let them wonder. It's none of their business. Mara closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the wall. Those ranch hands who were here earlier, the ones who laughed at my scar, they're going to spread it around that I backed down, that I was too afraid to face Cal Harker. Let them, Silas's voice was firm. Anyone who thinks mercy is the same as cowardice is a fool. You were the bigger person today, Mara. That takes more strength than pulling a trigger ever did. Doesn't feel like strength. Feels like I failed. Failed what? A promise you made to a dead man 14 years ago? A promise that's already cost you everything you were? Silas shook his head. You didn't fail, you survived. And right now that's the bravest thing you could do. Gideon made a sound of agreement. The boys survived too. Both of you walked away when you could have died. That's not failure. That's choosing life over death. Choosing tomorrow over yesterday. Tomorrow? Mara said the word like she was testing it out. What does that even look like for someone like me? Whatever you want it to look like, Silas said. You could stay here. Silverton's not far. You could settle down, find work, or you could move on, start fresh, somewhere nobody knows your name or your story. I don't know how to do either of those things. Then you learn, same way you learned everything else. Silas stood up with a grunt, offered her his hand. Come on, get up off the floor. First step in starting over is standing on your own 2 feet. Mara took his hand and let him pull her up. Her legs were steadier than she expected. The door suddenly burst open and the 3 ranch hands from earlier tumbled in, talking over each other in their excitement. They stopped dead when they saw Mara standing there, alive and apparently unharmed. Tom, the red-haired one, looked confused. We heard there was going to be a gunfight. Cal Harker was supposed to... He cut himself off, noticing the tension in the room. There was no gunfight, Silas said firmly. Mr. Harker came in, had a conversation, and left. That's all. But we heard... You heard wrong. Now, unless you boys are here to actually buy something, I suggest you move along. They stood there for another moment, clearly disappointed by the lack of blood and drama. The shorter one, the one who'd apologized earlier, caught Mara's eye and gave her a small nod before herding his friends back toward the door. Sorry for intruding, ma'am, he said quietly. Glad you're all right. Then they were gone again, and Mara could hear them outside already spreading the story of how nothing happened, how the famous showdown turned out to be just 2 people talking. That's going to make for boring gossip, Silas observed. Good, Mara said. Let them be bored. Let them forget about me entirely. They won't forget. But maybe they'll start remembering you for something other than killing. Silas moved back behind his counter, started straightening items that didn't need straightening, busy work to fill the silence. You know, you never did pay me for that rifle and ammunition. Mara almost smiled. I left money in my saddlebag, $300. It's yours. That's too much. It's what I owe you. For the rifle, for the ammunition, for not asking questions when I needed you not to ask them. She paused. And for standing with me today, even though you didn't have to. Where else would I be? This is my shop. If there was going to be trouble, I was going to be here for it. Silas pulled out a ledger, made a notation in it. $300. That settles your account, Mrs. Vale. You're paid in full. Just Mara. What? Don't call me Mrs. Vale anymore. I'm just Mara now. The rest of it, the marriage, the promise, the 14 years of hunting, that's done. I'm just Mara. Silas looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. All right then, just Mara. Welcome to the rest of your life. The words hit harder than they should have. The rest of her life. It stretched out in front of her, vast and empty and terrifying. No plan, no purpose, no clear enemy to fight or goal to achieve. Just tomorrow and the day after and the day after that.
I don't know if I can do this, she said quietly. Gideon spoke from his corner. You already are doing it. You made the choice. You lowered the gun. Everything after that is just details. Big details. Sure, but still just details. Where you'll sleep tonight, what you'll eat for breakfast, whether you'll stay in Silverton or move on. Those are all just choices. Same as the choice you made a few minutes ago not to kill that boy. He's not a boy. He's 30-something years old.
Everyone's a boy or a girl to me. I'm old enough to remember when their grandparents were young. Gideon stood up, gathering his things. I'm heading back to the mountains, getting too civilized down here for my taste. You're leaving? Mara asked. Nothing keeping me here now. The show's over. Both of you chose to live. My work is done. What work? You didn't do anything except sit there. I was here. That was enough.
Gideon moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her. You want some advice from an old man who's made every mistake you're about to make? I don't know. Do I? Probably not, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. He leaned on his walking stick, his ancient eyes sharp. Don't try to become who you were before. That person is gone.
You can't go back to being the schoolteacher who married Thomas Vale, but you also don't have to stay the ghost hunter. There's something in between, someone new. Let yourself find her. And if I can't, then you keep trying until you do, or you die trying. Either way, it beats standing still. He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that might have been respect. Good luck, girl. You're going to need it. Then he was gone too, leaving just Mara and Silas in the shop. The old shopkeeper busied himself with closing up, locking cases and tallying receipts like this was any other Tuesday. Mara watched him work, grateful for the normalcy of it. You can stay here tonight if you need to, Silas said without looking up from his ledger. Got a room upstairs. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and the bed's clean. I should get back to Silverton. You should rest. You look like you're about to fall over. He finally looked at her. Stay, get your bearings. Leave in the morning if you want to leave. Mara wanted to argue, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She'd been running on anger and adrenaline for so long that now, without them, she felt hollowed out. All right, she said. One night, then I'll figure out what comes next. One night, Silas agreed. Then tomorrow's problem can wait for tomorrow. He led her upstairs to a small room with a narrow bed, a wash basin, and a window overlooking the street. It was sparse but clean, and right now it looked like the most comfortable place Mara had ever seen. There's water in the basin and clean towels in the drawer, Silas said from the doorway. I'll bring up some food in a bit. You should eat something. I'm not hungry. You should eat anyway. Body needs fuel even when the spirit's empty. He left her alone. Mara sat on the edge of the bed, her gun still on her hip. She should take it off, should hang up her coat and wash her face and try to feel human again, but she couldn't make herself move. Instead, she stared out the window at the gray November sky and wondered what Cal Harker was doing right now. Riding east, probably. Heading back toward Boston and whatever remained of his old life. Maybe trying to find Elizabeth and apologize. Maybe just running from the ghost he'd almost become. They were the same, she realized. Both running from the same thing. Both trying to escape the weight of choices made in anger and grief. The difference was Cal had someone to go back to, or at least the memory of someone. Elizabeth might not take him back, but at least there was a possibility. A door that might open if he knocked on it the right way. Mara had nobody. Thomas was 14 years dead. Her family had disowned her when she'd taken up the hunt. The few friends she'd made along the way were scattered across 3 territories, and most of them probably thought she was dead by now anyway. She was truly alone in a way she hadn't let herself acknowledge until this moment. The realization should have hurt. Instead, it just felt empty. She'd been alone for so long that solitude had become her natural state. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Silas entered with a tray, bread, cheese, some kind of stew that smelled better than it probably tasted. Eat, he said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. Don't argue with me about it. Mara picked up the spoon and took a bite of the stew. It was surprisingly good. Where'd you learn to cook? She asked. Had to learn when my wife died. It was either that or starve. Silas settled into the room's only chair. That was 20 years ago. Still miss her every day, but the missing gets quieter over time. Does it, the missing? Eventually. Won't ever go away completely, but it stops being the loudest thing in your head. Other things start to matter again. Small things at first, the taste of good coffee, the feel of sun on your face. Then bigger things, friends, work, new memories that don't hurt. Mara ate another spoonful of stew. How long did it take before things mattered again? For me, a couple years. But I didn't spend those years hunting down the people responsible for her death. I just grieved and got angry and eventually learned to live with it. He studied her face. You've got a longer road ahead. 14 years is a lot of momentum to overcome. Maybe I can overcome it. Maybe this is just who I am now. That's what I thought too. Turns out I was wrong. People change, Mara, sometimes in spite of themselves. They sat in silence while she finished eating. When the food was gone, Silas took the tray but didn't leave immediately. What you did today, he said, choosing not to kill him. That took more courage than anything else you've done in the last 14 years. It didn't feel like courage, it felt like giving up. Sometimes giving up is the bravest thing you can do, especially when the thing you're giving up is killing you. He moved toward the door. Get some rest. We'll figure out tomorrow when it gets here. After he left, Mara finally took off her gun belt and hung it on the bedpost. The room felt too quiet without the familiar weight on her hip. She lay down on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion pulled her under within minutes. She dreamed of Thomas, not the nightmare version she usually saw, the one nailed to the barn wall, throat cut, dying slow. This was different. This was Thomas from before, from the good days. They were in their small house outside of town, and he was reading while she graded papers from her students. Simple, domestic, peaceful. In the dream, he looked up from his book and smiled at her. You did good today, he said. I didn't kill him. I was supposed to kill him. No, you were supposed to keep a promise. But promises can change. I release you from it, Mara. You don't have to carry this anymore. But you said, I know what I said. I was dying and angry and scared. I wasn't thinking about what it would cost you, but I am now. He set down his book and came to sit beside her. You kept the promise for 14 years. That's enough. More than enough. Now I need you to make me a different promise. What promise? Promise me you'll live. Not just survive, but actually live. Find something worth waking up for that isn't revenge. Build something instead of destroying. Be someone Thomas Vale would have been proud to know. Mara's dream self was crying. I don't know if I can. You can. You already started today when you lowered that gun. Now you just keep going. Then the dream shifted, and she was standing in the barn where he'd died. But it was clean now. No blood. No violence. Just an empty barn full of sunlight. Thomas was gone, but his voice lingered. Let me go, Mara. Please, let both of us go. She woke up with tears on her face and the early morning light streaming through the window. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then it all came back. The gun shop, Cal Harker, the choice she'd made. Her hand went automatically to her hip, reaching for the gun that wasn't there. Old habit. She sat up, wiping her face. Outside, the town was waking up. She could hear voices, the sound of horses, the ordinary noise of ordinary people living ordinary lives. For 14 years, she'd been separate from all that. The ghost hunter, the woman who existed outside normal life, who lived in the spaces between towns and the silences between conversations. But maybe she didn't have to be that person anymore. Maybe Thomas was right. Not the dying Thomas who'd demanded vengeance, but the dream Thomas who'd released her from it. Maybe it was time to let him go. Let all of it go. The thought terrified her, but it also felt like the first honest thing she'd considered in 14 years. She stood up, straightened her clothes, strapped her gun back on. Some habits died harder than others. Then she went downstairs. Silas was already up, sweeping the shop floor. He looked up when she appeared. Morning, coffee's on the stove if you want some. Thanks. Mara poured herself a cup, savoring the warmth. I've been thinking. Usually dangerous, but go on. I'm going to stay in Silverton, for a while at least. Try to figure out what comes next. Silas stopped sweeping. You sure about that? Staying in one place, being around people who might know your story? No. but I'm not sure about anything right now. Might as well be unsure somewhere I've already got a room. She sipped the coffee. Besides, running to somewhere new won't change what I need to change. That's got to happen inside, not outside. That's smart thinking. Don't sound so surprised. Not surprised, just glad. He resumed sweeping. If you need work, I know some people who are hiring. Nothing glamorous, but it's honest. I'll think about it. Mara finished her coffee, set the cup down. Thank you, Silas, for everything. You already paid me $300, remember? I didn't pay you for this, for believing I could choose different, for giving me a place to make that choice. Silas waved this away, embarrassed. Just did what anyone would do. No, you did what almost nobody would do, and it mattered. She left before he could respond, stepping out into the cold morning air. Her horse was still tied up outside, patient and waiting. She untied it, preparing to ride back to Silverton. But first she looked down the street in the direction Cal had ridden the day before. He was long gone now, probably 50 miles away or more. But in some strange way, she felt connected to him. Two ghosts who'd chosen to stop haunting. She hoped he made it. Hoped he found Elizabeth or someone like her. Hoped he figured out how to be something other than the sum of his brother's mistakes. And she hoped the same for herself. The ride back to Silverton took most of the morning. When she arrived, she half expected people to stare, to whisper, to point at the ghost hunter who'd come back without killing her target. But nobody paid her much attention. She was just another rider coming into town on a cold November day. Anonymous, ordinary. It was the best feeling she'd had in 14 years. The boarding house on Maple Street looked exactly as she'd left it 3 days ago. Same peeling paint, same crooked shutter on the second floor, same Mrs. Henderson sweeping the front porch like she did every morning, rain or shine. The old woman looked up as Mara dismounted, her weathered face showing no surprise at Mara's return. "Thought you might not come back," Mrs. Henderson said, continuing to sweep. "So did I. But here you are." "Here I am." Mara tied her horse to the post. "My room still available?" "Paid through the end of the month. It's yours if you want it, Mrs." Henderson paused in her sweeping, studying Mara with eyes that had seen too much of life to be easily fooled. "You look different." "I feel different." "Good different or bad different?" Mara considered the question. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a month." Mrs. Henderson nodded like this made perfect sense. "Well, come on in. I made biscuits this morning. They're probably still warm." The boarding house smelled like coffee and wood smoke and the lavender soap Mrs. Henderson used on everything. Mara had been living here for 8 months, but it had never felt like home. Just another place to sleep between hunts, between kills, between the endless search for men who deserved to die. Now, walking through the familiar hallway to her small room on the second floor, she wondered if maybe it could be something more. Not home exactly, but a start. Her room was exactly as she'd left it. Narrow bed, small dresser, window overlooking the street. She'd accumulated almost nothing in 8 months, a few changes of clothes, her weapons, some supplies, a life that could be packed into a single saddlebag and carried away at a moment's notice. She sat on the bed and realized she was shaking. The enormity of what she'd done, or rather, what she hadn't done, was catching up with her. 14 years. 14 years of singular purpose, and she'd walked away from it in a gun shop on a Tuesday afternoon. Just lowered her weapon and let the last Harker brother ride away alive. Part of her felt like she'd betrayed Thomas, broken the promise she'd made while holding his dying body. The ghost hunter in her screamed that she'd failed, that she'd let sentiment override justice, that she'd become weak. But another part, a quieter part that sounded suspiciously like the dream Thomas from last night, whispered that maybe, just maybe, she'd done the right thing. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Mrs. Henderson entered with a plate of biscuits and a cup of coffee. "Figured you could use this. You look half-starved." "I ate yesterday." "Once. That's not enough." The old woman set the plate on the dresser. "Been hearing some interesting stories around town this morning." Mara's stomach tightened. "What kind of stories?" "The kind about a famous shootout that didn't happen. About the ghost hunter and Cal Harker standing face to face in Boone's gun shop, and both of them walking away breathing." Mrs. Henderson's eyes were sharp. "That true?" "More or less." "So you didn't kill him?" "No."
And he didn't kill you. Obviously not. Mrs. Henderson settled into the room's only chair, making herself comfortable. Want to tell me why? Not particularly. Fair enough. But people are going to ask. Whole town's buzzing about it. Some folks are calling you a coward. Others are saying you showed mercy. A few are saying Cal Harker must have bribed you or threatened you or some other nonsense. Mara picked up a biscuit, broke off a piece. Let them say what they want. Doesn't change what happened. No, but it might change how you live here. Silverton's a small town, Mara. Reputation matters. And right now your reputation is confused. My reputation's been confused for 14 years. People didn't know whether to fear me or respect me or pity me. This is just more of the same. Maybe. Or maybe this is your chance to decide what you want people to see when they look at you. Mrs. Henderson leaned forward. I'm going to tell you something and you're going to listen because I'm old and I've earned the right to speak my mind. Mara ate another piece of biscuit and waited. You came to this boarding house 8 months ago looking like death warmed over, Mrs. Henderson said. Kept to yourself, paid on time, didn't cause trouble. I didn't ask questions because it wasn't my business. But I knew what you were. Everyone knew. The ghost hunter. The woman who'd killed 3 men and was hunting the 4th. You let me stay anyway. Because I figured you'd either finish your business and leave, or you'd get yourself killed trying. Either way, it wasn't going to be my problem for long. The old woman's face softened. But then you didn't die. You came back. And that means you're choosing to stay alive, which means you need to figure out what staying alive looks like for someone like you. Someone like me? Someone who spent half their life being one thing and now has to learn to be something else. Mrs. Henderson stood up, moved toward the door. I've known a few people like that over the years. Some of them managed it, some didn't. The ones who made it were the ones who stopped looking backward and started looking forward. And the ones who didn't make it? They kept trying to be who they used to be until it killed them. Or they gave up and let the bottle do the job. Or they just faded away, too tired to keep fighting and too broken to heal. She paused in the doorway. Don't be one of those, Mara. You've got more fight in you than that. Then she was gone, leaving Mara alone with her biscuits and her thoughts. The rest of the day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Mara tried to read, tried to sleep, tried to clean her weapons, but her hands shook too badly to do a proper job of it. Everything felt wrong, like she was wearing someone else's skin. By evening, she couldn't stand the confines of her room anymore. She went downstairs and out into the street, walking with no particular destination in mind. Silverton in November was a study in gray. Gray sky, gray buildings, gray faces hurrying through the cold. The town had grown in the past year. New shops, new houses, more people. Progress, they called it. Civilization creeping westward one building at a time. Mara walked past the general store, the telegraph office, the small church where she'd never set foot. People nodded to her as she passed, but nobody stopped to talk. Some of them whispered after she'd gone by. She caught fragments of conversation. That's her, the one who heard she let him go. Just stood there, and my cousin said there were 3 witnesses, and they all... She kept walking until she reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open country. The mountains in the distance were already topped with snow, dark against the darkening sky. This was where she'd always felt most comfortable. Out in the empty spaces, away from people and their questions and their judgment. For 14 years, the wilderness had been more home to her than any town. But standing here now, looking at those mountains, she didn't feel the usual pull. Didn't feel the urge to saddle up and ride out into the emptiness. The thought of going back to that solitary existence made her chest tight. Mara Vale? She turned to find a man approaching, mid-40s, dressed in a suit that had seen better days. He had the look of someone who worked with numbers. Pale skin, ink-stained fingers, the slight stoop of a man who spent his days bent over a ledger. Who's asking? Name's Robert Finch. I run the general store in town. He stopped a respectful distance away. I was wondering if I could have a word. About what? About a job, if you're interested. Mara studied him. What makes you think I'm looking for work? Word around town is you're planning to stay in Silverton for a while, and unless you've got money saved up, you'll need employment. He shifted his weight, nervous. I need someone to help with inventory and stock management. It's not exciting work, but it pays fair and it's steady.
Why me? Plenty of people in this town need work. Because you know how to keep track of things, organize, plan ahead. Finch met her eyes. I know what you've been doing these past 14 years, Mrs. Vale, and I know it took considerable skill to track men across 3 territories. Those same skills could be useful in a different context. Mara almost laughed. You want to hire the ghost hunter to count cans of beans? I want to hire someone who's precise, determined, and doesn't give up when things get difficult. The rest of your history is your business, not mine. He pulled out a business card, handed it to her. Think about it. If you're interested, come by the store tomorrow morning and we'll discuss terms. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing there with his card in her hand. A job, regular employment. Waking up every morning to count inventory instead of checking her weapons. It sounded absurd, impossible, like trying to teach a wolf to pull a plow, but it also sounded normal. Safe, like the kind of life a person might build if they wanted to stop being a ghost. She slipped the card into her pocket and walked back toward the boarding house. That night, sleep came harder than before. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the town settling down for the night. Voices, footsteps, the distant bark of a dog. Normal sounds. Human sounds. The kind of sounds she'd learned to ignore during 14 years of sleeping under stars and waking to birdsong or silence. Somewhere out there, Cal Harker was probably having the same struggle. Probably lying awake wondering if he'd made the right choice. Wondering if mercy was the same as weakness. Wondering what came next. She hoped he'd found his answers, or at least found peace with not having them. The next morning, Mara surprised herself by putting on her cleanest shirt, running a brush through her hair, and walking to the general store. Robert Finch looked up from his counter when she entered, his face breaking into a genuine smile. Mrs. Vale, I'm glad you came. It's just Mara, and I haven't said yes yet. I just came to hear what you're offering. Fair enough. He gestured for her to follow him into the back room, where shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with goods in varying states of organization. This is the problem. I've got inventory coming in faster than I can track it. Got customers asking for items I know I have but can't find. Got suppliers sending bills for things I don't remember ordering. Mara looked at the chaos and felt something unexpected. A challenge. A puzzle to solve. You need a system. I need several systems. Organization, tracking, reordering. Someone who can look at this mess and make sense of it. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. I can pay 75 cents a day to start. More if you prove yourself valuable. What are the hours? 7 to 6, 6 days a week. Sundays off. Mara calculated quickly. 75 cents a day, 6 days a week. $4.50 a week. Not a fortune, but enough to pay her room and board with a little left over. I'll try it for a week, she said. See if it suits. If it does, we can talk about making it permanent. Finch's smile widened. That's all I ask. When can you start? Now's as good a time as any. The work was nothing like hunting. There was no danger, no adrenaline, no life or death decisions. Just methodical sorting and counting and organizing. Taking inventory of canned goods, dry goods, tools, fabric. Making lists, checking stock against ledgers, creating a system where chaos had reigned. It should have been boring, mind-numbing even. Instead, Mara found it oddly soothing. There was a rhythm to it, a predictability. No surprises lurking around corners, no need to sleep with one eye open, just honest work that left her tired at the end of the day in a completely different way than tracking had. By the end of the first week, she'd reorganized half the stockroom and created a new inventory system that Finch declared was worth twice what he was paying her. You've got a real talent for this, he said, surveying the neat rows of labeled shelves. Ever think about doing this kind of work before? Before I was a school teacher. Before that, I helped my father run a dry goods store back east. The memory surfaced unexpectedly. She hadn't thought about her father's store in years. Guess some things stick with you. Well, I'm grateful they did. You've made my life considerably easier. Finch counted out her wages for the week. You planning to stay on? Mara took the money, feeling the weight of it in her hand. Honest wages for honest work. No blood involved. Yeah, she said. I'll stay on. Word spread through Silverton that the ghost hunter was working at the general store. Some people avoided the place entirely. uncomfortable with the idea of being served by a woman who'd killed 3 men. Others came specifically to gawk, to see if the stories were true. Mara ignored both groups. She did her work, kept her head down, and slowly, so slowly she barely noticed it happening, started to become part of the town's fabric. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house came in to buy flour and stopped to chat about the weather. The blacksmith's wife needed help finding a particular type of thread and thanked Mara genuinely when she located it. Even the 3 ranch hands from the gun shop showed up one day, looking sheepish. Tom, the red-haired one who'd mocked her scar, approached the counter while his friends hung back. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize for what I said that day. About your scar. It was cruel and stupid, and I'm sorry." Mara looked at him for a long moment. He was young, maybe 22, with the kind of face that hadn't learned to hide shame yet. "You were trying to impress your friends," she said. "Make yourself feel bigger by making someone else feel smaller. It's what young fools do." Still, it was wrong. Yes, it was. But you're here now, apologizing. That takes more courage than the original insult. She handed him the change for his purchase. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after." He left looking lighter, and Mara realized she felt lighter too. Forgiveness, she discovered, wasn't just for the person being forgiven. 3 weeks into her new job, Mara was closing up the store when she noticed someone standing across the street, watching. A woman, well-dressed, with dark hair and an uncertain expression. The woman crossed the street, approaching slowly. "Are you Mara Vale?" she asked. "I am. Do I know you?" "No, but you knew my brother." The woman's voice wavered. "Silas Harker? You killed him 2 years ago outside Santa Fe." Mara's hand instinctively moved toward her hip, where her gun no longer sat. She'd stopped wearing it to work after the first week, keeping it locked in her room instead. Now she felt naked without it. "I'm not here to cause trouble," the woman said quickly, seeing Mara's reaction. "I just wanted to meet you to understand." "Understand what?" "Why my brother had to die, why all of them had to die." She wrapped her arms around herself. "My name is Margaret. Margaret Harker. Silas was my twin." Mara felt like she'd been punched. "I didn't know he had a sister." "Most people didn't. I left home young, moved to Denver, tried to make a different life. But he was still my brother. When I heard he'd been killed, I needed to know why." He rode with his brothers. They were outlaws. They killed people. I know what they were, but I also know what they could have been, what Silas almost was, before Owen pulled him into the gang. Margaret's eyes were wet. "He wrote to me sometimes. Never said where he was or what he was doing, but I could read between the lines. He hated the life he was living, wanted to leave but didn't know how. He could have just left. Nothing was stopping him. Except loyalty. Except fear of disappointing Owen. Except not knowing how to be anything other than what his brothers expected him to be." Margaret wiped her eyes. "I'm not excusing what he did. I'm just saying he was more than just an outlaw. He was a person, complicated, flawed, but a person." Mara thought about Cal's words in the gun shop, about how Silas hadn't even been at the barn the night Thomas died, about how she'd killed him anyway because his name was Harker. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for your loss." "Are you? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear?" The question was fair. Mara considered it carefully before answering. "Both," she admitted. "I'm sorry you lost your brother. But I'm not sorry I killed him. He'd done terrible things to other people, even if he wasn't there the night my husband died. He'd made choices that led him to that moment outside Santa Fe, and I made choices too. We both did what we thought we had to do. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out if there's a difference between justice and revenge. If killing him made the world better, or just made me feel better. And I honestly don't know the answer." Margaret looked at her for a long time. "Cal told me about what happened in the gun shop, about how you both chose not to kill each other. You know Cal? He's my brother too, half-brother technically. Same father, different mothers. We've kept in touch over the years." She managed a small smile. "He wrote to me after he left here, said he'd finally understood what I'd been trying to tell him for 2 years, that revenge wouldn't bring them back, wouldn't heal anything, would just make him into another casualty of the Harker name. Is he all right, Cal?"
He's in Denver now, trying to find work, trying to build something new. It's not easy for him, but he's trying. Margaret paused. He wanted me to give you something if I ever found you. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, handed it to Mara. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 words written in careful script. Thank you.
See. Mara stared at the note, feeling something tight in her chest loosen slightly. What will you do now? Margaret asked. I'm working here, at the store, trying to figure out what a normal life looks like. Is it working? The normal life? I don't know yet. Some days it feels possible. Other days I wake up reaching for my gun and wondering who I'm supposed to hunt. Mara folded the note carefully. But I'm still here. Still trying. That's something. It's more than something. It's everything. Margaret adjusted her shawl. I should go. I just wanted to see you, to put a face to the name that haunted my family. Wait, Mara surprised herself. Would you like to get coffee? There's a cafe down the street. They make decent pie. Margaret looked surprised too. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. They walked to the cafe in silence, 2 women connected by blood and death and the ghost of men who'd made terrible choices. Should have been awkward, should have been impossible. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Not friendship exactly, but understanding. A shared burden that became lighter when carried together. Over coffee and pie, Margaret talked about her brothers. Not the outlaws, but the boys they'd been before everything went wrong. Owen's love of horses. Clay's terrible jokes. Silas's surprising talent for drawing. And Mara found herself talking about Thomas. Really talking, for the first time in 14 years. Not about how he died, but about how he'd lived. His patience with his students, his terrible singing voice, the way he'd loved sunsets. He sounds like he was a good man, Margaret said. He was. He deserved better than what he got. So did Silas. So did all of them, probably. Margaret finished her coffee. But they made their choices and paid for them. Now it's up to us to figure out what comes next. You make it sound simple. It's not. But it's necessary. Margaret stood to leave, then paused. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you regret it? Any of it? Mara thought about the question carefully. I regret that it had to happen. I regret that Thomas died. I regret that your brothers became the kind of men who needed to be hunted. But do I regret keeping my promise to Thomas? Do I regret making sure Owen and Clay faced justice for what they did? No, I don't regret that. Even though it cost you 14 years? Even though. Those years are gone either way. I can't get them back. All I can do is make sure the next 14 years are different. Margaret nodded slowly. Cal said something similar. Said he'd lost 2 years to anger and grief, and he wasn't going to lose any more. She extended her hand. Thank you for the coffee, Mara, and for being honest. Mara shook her hand. Thank you for coming, for giving me a chance to see your brothers as people instead of just names on a list. After Margaret left, Mara sat alone in the cafe, nursing her cold coffee and thinking about the strangeness of life. 3 weeks ago, she'd been pointing a gun at Cal Harker. Now she was having coffee with his sister, talking about dead brothers and lost futures. The world was full of unexpected turns. She paid for the coffee and pie and walked back to the boarding house as the sun set, painting the gray town in shades of orange and pink. Mrs. Henderson was on the porch again, perpetually sweeping. You've got mail, the old woman said without looking up. Left it on your bed. Mara climbed the stairs, wondering who would be writing to her. She had no family left, no friends who knew where she was. The envelope on her bed bore a postmark from Santa Fe. Inside was a short letter written in an elegant hand. Dear Mrs. Vale, my name is Sarah Mitchell. You may not remember me, but 2 years ago in Santa Fe, you told me that a man named Silas Harker's last words included a message for me. He said to tell me he was sorry. I wanted you to know that I received that message, even though you were just a stranger delivering it. And I wanted to thank you for giving me that closure. Silas and I had a complicated history, and knowing he thought of me at the end means more than you might realize. I heard through mutual acquaintances that you recently chose mercy over vengeance when facing the last of the Harker brothers. I want you to know that I think that took more courage than anything else you could have done. Sometimes the bravest thing is choosing to stop fighting. With gratitude, Sarah Mitchell. Mara read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and placed it in her dresser drawer next to Cal's note. 2 pieces of paper. 2 connections to a past she was trying to leave behind. 2 reminders that the choices she'd made, both the violent ones and the merciful ones, had ripples that reached farther than she'd ever intended. She sat on her bed and realized she was crying, not from sadness or regret, just from the overwhelming weight of being seen, of being acknowledged not as the ghost hunter or a killer or a widow, but as a person who'd made difficult choices and was trying to live with them. The tears fell for a long time, washing away some of the accumulated grief of 14 years. When they finally stopped, Mara felt emptier, but also somehow cleaner, like a wound that had been lanced and could finally start to heal. She washed her face, changed into a nightgown, and lay down in bed. Outside, Silverton settled into its nightly routine. Inside, Mara felt something shifting. Not healing, exactly, but changing. Evolving into something she didn't have a name for yet. Tomorrow she'd go back to the store, count inventory, help customers, live another ordinary day in her increasingly ordinary life, and maybe, eventually, ordinary would stop feeling like failure and start feeling like victory. 6 months passed before Mara realized she'd stopped counting the days since the gun shop. It happened on a Wednesday morning in late April. She was reorganizing the fabric section of the store when the realization struck her. She couldn't remember exactly how long it had been. 6 months? 7? The precision that had defined her for 14 years had quietly slipped away, replaced by the comfortable blur of routine. Robert Finch noticed her pause. Something wrong? No, just thinking. She smoothed a bolt of calico back into place. How long have I been working here? Coming up on 6 months next week. Why? You planning to leave? No, just realized I'd lost track of time. Finch smiled. That's usually a good sign. Means you're living instead of just surviving. The word stayed with her through the rest of the day, living instead of surviving. It was a small distinction that made all the difference. That evening, as she walked back to the boarding house, she noticed things she'd been too numb to see before. The way the spring light turned the mountains gold, the sound of children playing in the street, the smell of bread baking at the bakery on the corner. Small things. Human things. The kind of details Thomas used to point out when they'd walk together. She realized she could think about him now without the immediate crushing weight of grief. The pain was still there, but it had changed shape. Become something she could carry instead of something that carried her. Mrs. Henderson was sitting on the porch when Mara arrived, which was unusual. The old woman typically spent evenings inside, doing whatever it was she did when she wasn't sweeping or collecting rent. Got more mail for you, Mrs. Henderson said, holding out an envelope. Came this afternoon. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the postmark was from Denver. Mara opened it, standing there on the porch. Dear Mara, I hope this letter finds you well. Margaret mentioned she'd met you in Silverton and that you seemed to be building a new life. I wanted to write and tell you something I should have said in the gun shop but didn't have the words for. You saved my life that day. Not by lowering your gun, though that was part of it. You saved me by showing me that revenge is just another kind of prison. That choosing to stop fighting doesn't make you weak, it makes you free. I found work here in Denver as a bookkeeper. It's honest work, nothing exciting, but it's mine. I'm also attempting to reconcile with Elizabeth. She's hesitant, understandably, but she's agreed to meet for coffee next week. I don't know if we'll find our way back to what we had, but I'm grateful for the chance to try. I wanted you to know that the choice you made, the choice we both made, has given me the opportunity to build something instead of destroy. And I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for that. I don't expect we'll ever meet again. Our paths crossed at the exact moment they needed to, and now they're diverging toward better places. But I'll always remember the woman who had every reason to kill me and chose mercy instead. With respect and gratitude, Cal Harker. Mara read the letter twice, then looked up to find Mrs. Henderson watching her with knowing eyes. Good news or bad? The old woman asked. Good, I think. Someone I almost killed is doing well. Mrs. Henderson didn't even blink. That's an unusual sentence, but I'll take your word for it. It's complicated.
Most worthwhile things are. Mrs. Henderson stood, her joints creaking.
You know what I've learned in 73 years? The world doesn't owe you simple. It doesn't owe you easy. All it owes you is the chance to choose. And from where I'm sitting, you've been making some decent choices lately. Lately being the key word. Every day is lately. Yesterday's gone. All you've got is what you do right now. She headed for the door, then paused. By the way, there's a town meeting next week. They're looking for someone to help organize the new library. Thought you might be interested, what with you being a former teacher and all. How did you know I was a teacher? I know everything that happens in this town. It's my gift and my curse. Mrs. Henderson disappeared inside, leaving Mara alone with Cal's letter. A library. The idea of being surrounded by books again, of helping people learn instead of hunting people to kill, felt both foreign and achingly familiar. Like remembering a language she'd once spoken fluently but had forgotten over time. She folded the letter carefully and went inside. The town meeting was held in the church basement on a Tuesday evening. Mara almost didn't go, uncomfortable with the idea of volunteering herself for something so public. But curiosity won out over discomfort. About 30 people had gathered, sitting on mismatched chairs and benches. Mara recognized most of them from the store. Robert Finch waved her over to an empty seat beside him. "Glad you came," he said. "We need people with organizational skills for this project." The meeting was led by a woman named Catherine Porter, who owned the town's only bookshop and had been campaigning for a proper library for 3 years. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, with the kind of determination that reminded Mara of herself. "We finally secured funding and a building," Catherine announced. "The old Miller House on 3rd Street has been donated to the town. It's got good bones but needs work. More importantly, we need to organize the collection, create a cataloging system, and establish lending procedures." She went on to outline the scope of the project. It was ambitious, converting a 3-story house into a functioning library, soliciting book donations, training volunteers. The kind of undertaking that required vision and follow-through. When Catherine asked for volunteers, Mara surprised herself by raising her hand. "I can help with the organizational systems," she said. "I've got experience with inventory management and cataloging." Catherine's eyes lit up. "Perfect. Can you start next week?" "I work at the general store during the day. This would be evenings and weekends. Does that work?" Mara glanced at Robert Finch, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes," she said. "That works." After the meeting, Catherine cornered her near the door. "I know who you are," she said without preamble. "The whole town knows. You're the ghost hunter." Mara tensed. And nothing. I don't care what you did before you came here. I care about whether you'll show up when you say you will and do the work that needs doing." Catherine extended her hand. "Everyone deserves a chance to be something new. You interested in being someone who builds things instead of destroys them?" The directness of it was refreshing. No judgment, no curiosity about her past, just a simple question about her future. Mara shook her hand. "Yes, I'm interested." The work on the library became the second anchor in Mara's new life. She spent her days at the general store and her evenings at the Miller House, sorting donations and creating systems. It was methodical work, satisfying in its own way. Catherine turned out to be demanding but fair, with impossibly high standards and the energy of someone half her age. She pushed Mara to think bigger, to plan better, to consider not just what the library was now, but what it could become. "This town is growing," Catherine said one evening as they worked on the second floor. 5 years from now, we'll have twice as many people. 10 years, maybe 4 times. This library needs to serve all of them, miners and merchants, children and scholars. Everyone deserves access to knowledge." "That's ambitious." "Damn right it is. Why aim small?" Catherine hefted a box of books onto a shelf. "You know what I've noticed about you, Mara?" "What's that?" "You think small. You organize perfectly. You solve problems efficiently, but you never ask yourself what could be instead of what is." Catherine fixed her with a penetrating stare. "Why is that?" Mara considered the question. "I spent 14 years focused on one single goal. Didn't allow myself to think about anything beyond it. Now that it's over, I guess I don't know how to think big anymore." "Well, learn, because the world needs people who can see what's possible and make it real. And you've got that in you, whether you believe it or not." The comment stuck with Mara long after she'd left for the evening. She walked home through the warm spring night thinking about possibility, about what could be instead of what was. For 14 years, her vision had narrowed to a single point: find the men, make them pay, keep the promise. There had been no room for anything else. But now that the tunnel had opened back up, she was standing in daylight and didn't know which direction to look. When she got back to the boarding house, she found Mrs. Henderson on the porch with another woman. Younger, maybe 35, with tired eyes and a small girl clinging to her skirt. "Mara, this is Helen Cartwright and her daughter Emma," Mrs. Henderson said. "They just arrived in town. Helen's looking for work and a place to stay." Helen's face was pale and drawn. "Mrs. Henderson said you might know if anyone's hiring. I can clean, cook, sew, whatever needs doing." Mara looked at the little girl, maybe 6 years old, with her mother's tired eyes and a dress that had been mended so many times it was more patches than original fabric. "Where's your husband?" Mara asked, then immediately regretted the bluntness. Helen's face went blank. "Dead. 3 months now. Mining accident." The familiar pain of widowhood flashed through Mara. She knew that blank look, that careful neutrality that was the only way to keep functioning when grief threatened to swallow you whole. "The general store might have work," Mara said. "I can talk to Mr. Finch tomorrow. And the library project needs volunteers. It doesn't pay, but it's something." "I can't afford to volunteer. I need wages." "I understand." Mara hesitated, then made a decision. "What if I talk to Mr. Finch about hiring you and I pay for your room here for the first week? Give you time to get on your feet." Helen's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." "Because someone helped me once when I needed it. And because I know what it's like to lose everything and have to start over." Mara looked at little Emma, who was watching the adults with the wary awareness of a child who'd learned too young that the world wasn't safe. Everyone deserves a chance. The next morning, Mara talked to Robert Finch. He was initially hesitant. He didn't need another employee, but Mara offered to take a small pay cut if he'd hire Helen part-time. "You'd give up wages to help a stranger?" Finch asked. "I'd give up wages to help someone who needs it more than I do." Finch studied her face for a long moment. "You've changed since you started working here. You know that?" "Is that a yes or a no to hiring Helen?" "It's a yes, but I'm not taking your wages. I'll hire her part-time at 40 cents a day. If she works out, we'll make it permanent at full pay." Helen started work 2 days later. She was quiet, efficient, grateful without being obsequious. Emma would sit in the corner of the stockroom after school, reading or drawing while her mother worked. One afternoon, Mara found Emma crying in the back room. The little girl tried to hide it, wiping her face quickly, but Mara had seen. "What's wrong?" Mara asked gently. "Nothing, ma'am." "Emma, I know what nothing looks like. This isn't it." The girl's face crumpled. "I miss my papa, and some kids at school said Mama and me don't belong here because we're charity cases." Mara sat down on a crate beside her. She thought about the ranch hands who'd mocked her scar, about all the times people had made her feel small or broken or less than. "You want to know a secret?" Mara said. Emma nodded, sniffling. "Everyone's a charity case at some point. Everyone needs help. The people who pretend they don't are just lying to themselves." Mara pulled out a handkerchief, handed it to the girl. "Your papa died, and that's terrible and unfair. But you and your mama are still here, still fighting, still trying. That takes more courage than anything those kids have ever had to do." "Mama says courage is being scared but doing it anyway." "Your mama's smart. You should listen to her." Emma wiped her eyes. "Are you scared of things, Miss Mara?" "Every single day." "Like what?" Mara thought about it. "I'm scared I'll never figure out how to be a normal person. I'm scared that the anger that kept me alive for so long will never really go away. I'm scared that I'll wake up one morning and not know who I'm supposed to be. That's a lot of scared." "It is. But I get up every morning anyway. That's what courage looks like." Emma considered this seriously. "My mama says you're a good person." "Your mama doesn't know the whole story." "She says the whole story doesn't matter, just what you do now." Out of the mouths of children, delivered by way of widowed mothers, Mara felt something shift in her chest. "Your mama's very smart," she said again. "You're lucky to have her." "I know." Emma stood up, her tears dried. "Thank you, Miss Mara." After the girl left,
Mara sat alone in the stockroom and thought about what she'd just said. The anger that kept me alive. It was the first time she'd admitted out loud that revenge had been more than just a promise. It had been a reason to keep breathing when breathing felt impossible.
And now that reason was gone, and she was still here, and she was terrified of the emptiness it had left behind. But maybe emptiness wasn't the right word. Maybe it was just space, room for something new to grow. The library opened in late June. It was a modest affair. 2 floors of the Miller House converted to reading rooms and stacks, with the 3rd floor reserved for future expansion. Catherine had organized a small ceremony with the mayor cutting a ribbon and giving a speech about progress and civilization. Mara stood in the back, uncomfortable with the attention. But when Catherine called her forward to acknowledge her contribution to the project, she forced herself to step up. Mara Vale has been instrumental in making this library a reality, Catherine announced to the assembled crowd. Her organizational skills and dedication have ensured that we're opening not just a building, but a properly functioning institution that will serve this community for years to come. The crowd applauded politely. Mara saw Robert Finch clapping enthusiastically, Mrs. Henderson nodding approvingly, Helen and Emma smiling from the middle row. And she saw the ranch hands too. Tom and his friends, looking uncomfortable but clapping nonetheless. When she caught Tom's eye, he gave her a small nod, something like respect. After the ceremony, people milled around examining the books and the new reading room. Mara was about to slip away when a hand touched her arm. It was Margaret Harker. "I didn't know you'd be here," Mara said. "I moved to Silverton 2 months ago. Opened a dressmaking shop on Main Street." Margaret smiled. "Thought it was time to build something in a place that didn't know my last name or my history." "Does it work? The fresh start?" "Some days better than others. But yes, mostly it works." Margaret looked around the library. "This is beautiful. You should be proud." "I just organized books." "You built something that will outlast you, that matters." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching people discover the library. 2 women who'd lost brothers, one to bullets, one to choices, finding unexpected peace in a converted house full of books. "Cal wrote to me," Margaret said after a while. "Said he and Elizabeth are trying again. Getting married in August. That's good. I'm glad for him. He wanted me to tell you something if I saw you. He said to say that choosing life over death was the hardest thing he's ever done, but also the best, and that he hopes you found the same peace." Mara thought about it. Peace seemed too strong a word, but maybe contentment, maybe the quiet satisfaction of building instead of destroying. "Tell him I'm working on it," she said. Summer turned to fall, and fall to winter again. The rhythm of Mara's new life became familiar enough to stop feeling strange. Work at the store, evenings at the library, Sundays helping Mrs. Henderson with repairs around the boarding house. Small, ordinary things that added up to something resembling a life. Helen Cartwright became more than just an employee. She became a friend, one of the few Mara had allowed herself in years. They'd have dinner together sometimes, her and Helen and Emma talking about nothing important, just the comfortable conversation of people who understood loss without needing to dissect it. One evening in December, nearly a year after the showdown in the gun shop, Mara was closing up the library when Catherine appeared with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "What's this?" Mara asked. "Celebration. The library just completed its first full year. Over 2,000 books borrowed, 40 new memberships, and not a single overdue fine we couldn't collect." Catherine poured generous measures into both glasses. "That's worth drinking to." They sat in the reading room, sipping whiskey and talking about plans for the next year. More books. Extended hours. Perhaps a children's reading program? "You ever think about teaching again?" Catherine asked. "Properly, I mean, not just organizing books." "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because the town's growing. And we need another school teacher. Current one's overwhelmed. You've got the background and the skills. You should consider it." "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "Why not? You work with children at the library. You helped Emma Cartwright through a rough patch. You've got patience and knowledge. What else do you need?" "I need to not be the ghost hunter anymore. And standing in front of a classroom with everyone knowing what I did." "Everyone already knows what you did. They also know what you're doing now, building things,
helping people, living a decent life.
Catherine refilled their glasses. You can't wait for people to forget your past before you start your future. They run parallel, not sequential. The words hit hard because they were true. Mara had been waiting for some kind of absolution, some moment when her slate would be wiped clean and she could start fresh. But that moment would never come. The past didn't disappear. It just became part of the story. I'll think about it, Mara said. Think fast. School board meets in January. That night, lying in bed, Mara thought about standing in front of a classroom again, about teaching children to read and write and think, about being someone who shaped futures instead of ending them. It terrified her, but it also felt right in a way nothing had felt right in 14 years. She thought about Thomas, who'd always believed in the power of education, who'd spent his evenings reading to anyone who'd listen, convinced that knowledge could transform lives. And she thought about the promise she'd made to him, the one that had consumed 14 years of her life. She'd kept it in her own brutal way, but now it was time for a different kind of promise, a promise to herself. To live, to build, to become someone who added more to the world than she took from it. In January, Mara applied for the teaching position. The school board interviewed her, asked careful questions about her qualifications and her past. She answered honestly. Yes, she'd killed 3 men. Yes, she'd spent 14 years hunting them. And yes, she'd chosen to stop before it consumed her entirely. The board deliberated for a week. Then they offered her the job. Her first day teaching was terrifying. 23 children staring at her, some curious, some wary, all knowing exactly who she was. Mara stood at the front of the room and realized she had no idea how to do this anymore. Then Emma Cartwright raised her hand from the back row. Yes, Emma? Miss Mara, what are we going to learn today? The simple question grounded her. What were they going to learn? Not who she'd been, not what she'd done, just what she could teach them. We're going to learn about poetry, Mara said, about how words can build worlds. She'd chosen poetry deliberately. Thomas had loved it, had read it to her in the evenings. She'd hated it back then, found it frivolous. But now she understood what he'd been trying to show her, that beauty and meaning could exist even in darkness. That language could heal as well as wound. They started with simple verses. Nursery rhymes, then moved to more complex works. She had them memorize lines, discuss meanings, write their own attempts. Some of the children took to it naturally. Others struggled, but they all tried, and that was enough. Teaching became the third anchor: store, library, school. 3 pillars holding up a life that felt increasingly solid. 2 years after the gun shop, Mara received another letter. This one was from Cal. Dear Mara, Elizabeth and I were married last summer. We're expecting our first child in April. I wanted you to know because you played a part in making this possible, even if you never intended to. I've been thinking a lot about that day in the gun shop, about how close we both came to throwing away everything for the sake of dead men who couldn't benefit from our sacrifice. And I've realized something. Revenge isn't about the people who wronged us. It's about us. It's about holding on to anger because anger feels better than grief. It's about control in situations where we have none. And it's about refusing to accept that sometimes terrible things happen and there's no one to blame who can make it right. My brothers did terrible things. So did I. In their name. But continuing the cycle wouldn't have honored them. It would have just created more pain, more loss, more people who had to choose between revenge and healing. I chose healing. So did you. And I think that's the bravest thing either of us could have done. I'm writing to tell you that I've forgiven you for my brother's deaths, not because you asked for forgiveness. You didn't, but because holding on to that anger was preventing me from being the man I want to be, the husband Elizabeth deserves, the father my child will need. I hope you found similar peace, and I hope you know that the woman who lowered her gun that day saved more than just my life. She saved my soul. With gratitude and hope, Cal Harker. Mara read the letter sitting on the porch of the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson had passed away the previous winter, and Mara had bought the building from her estate. She was a landlady now, in addition to everything else. Another unexpected turn. Cal's words about forgiveness sat heavy in her chest. He'd forgiven her, but had she forgiven herself? For the years lost. For the person she'd become. For the choices she'd made in anger and grief. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single moment. Maybe it was a process, slow and gradual, built from small acts of kindness and creation. Maybe every day she chose to build instead of destroy was another step toward forgiving the woman she'd been. She folded the letter and went inside to make dinner.
Helen and Emma were coming over, and she'd promised to teach Emma how to bake pie. 5 years after the gun shop, Silverton held a ceremony honoring longtime residents who'd contributed to the town's growth. Mara was surprised to find her name on the list. Catherine Porter gave the speech over Mara's objections. Mara Vale came to Silverton carrying more weight than any person should have to bear, Catherine said to the assembled crowd. She'd spent 14 years becoming someone she never wanted to be. But instead of letting that define her forever, she made a different choice. She chose to build, to teach, to help others find their footing when their own lives fell apart. Catherine went on to list Mara's contributions: the library organization, the teaching position, the boarding house that she ran with fairness and compassion, often giving breaks on rent to families struggling to make ends meet. But more than any specific accomplishment, Catherine concluded, Mara represents something this town needs to remember: that we're not defined by our worst moments, that change is possible, that choosing mercy over vengeance isn't weakness, it's the highest form of strength. The crowd applauded. Mara stood awkwardly at the front, uncomfortable with the attention, but unable to deny the truth in Catherine's words. After the ceremony, Tom, the red-haired ranch hand who'd mocked her scar 5 years ago, approached her. He was older now, no longer a kid playing at being tough. He'd married, had a baby on the way, settled into respectable adulthood. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not shooting me that day in the gun shop when I was being an ass, and for showing me what real strength looks like." He gestured to his pregnant wife waiting nearby. "I've got a daughter coming, and I want her to grow up knowing that the strongest people aren't the ones who never get knocked down. They're the ones who get back up and choose to be better." Mara looked at this young man who'd learned wisdom the hard way, by watching someone else struggle through it. "Your daughter's lucky to have you," she said. "I hope I can be half as brave as you've been." After he left, Mara stood alone for a moment, thinking about bravery. For 14 years, she'd thought bravery meant hunting killers across 3 territories, facing down danger, never backing down from a fight. Now she understood that real bravery was quieter. It was choosing to live when dying would be easier, building when destroying felt more satisfying, forgiving when holding grudges felt more justified. It was getting up every morning and facing another day of being human, flawed, uncertain, of trying to be better than you were yesterday, even when yesterday was pretty damn good. That evening, Mara walked to the cemetery on the edge of town. She'd avoided it for 5 years, unable to face what it represented. But now she felt ready. She found Thomas's grave easily. She'd arranged for his body to be moved here 3 years ago, brought back from the cemetery outside their old home. He deserved to rest somewhere she could visit, somewhere she'd chosen to build her new life. The headstone was simple, just his name and dates, and the inscription she'd chosen: beloved husband and teacher. Mara sat on the ground beside the grave, not caring about the dirt on her dress. "I kept the promise," she said quietly, "the one I made to you in the barn. I found the men who killed you, made sure they paid for it." The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a bird sang. "But I'm breaking the other part of that promise now. The part where I said I'd never rest until they were all dead. Because I realized something, Thomas. You wouldn't have wanted me to become what I became. The ghost hunter, the killer, the woman who lived for nothing but revenge." She traced his name on the headstone with her finger. "Cal Harker is still alive. The last brother. And I chose to let him live because killing him would have made me into the thing I hated. Would have proven that your death didn't just take you. It took me too." A tear ran down her face, following the path of her scar. "So I'm letting it go, all of it. The anger, the mission, the need for every last drop of blood. I'm choosing to live instead. And I hope, wherever you are, you understand. I hope you're proud of me for stopping instead of finishing." She sat there for a long time, crying quietly for everything lost and everything gained, for the young teacher she'd been, for the hunter she'd become, for the woman she was still learning to be. When the tears stopped, she felt lighter. Not healed. Healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey, but better. Closer to whole than she'd been in 15 years. "I'm teaching again," she told Thomas's grave.
Your students' children, probably, and I tell them the same things you used to tell me, about knowledge being power, about compassion being strength, about how we're defined not by what happens to us, but by how we respond to it. She stood up, brushing dirt from her dress. I'll come back and visit. Tell you about my life, about the town, about the students, about all the ordinary, beautiful things that happen when you choose to live instead of just survive. She touched the headstone one last time. Thank you for loving me, for making me promise to fight back, and for releasing me from that promise when it started destroying me. She smiled through fresh tears. I'll see you on the other side, Thomas, but not for a long, long time. I've got too much living left to do. Walking back through the cemetery, Mara passed other graves, other stories of lives cut short or lived long, other people who'd loved and lost and somehow kept going. She thought about Gideon Cross, who'd survived his own revenge and found a way to keep living, about Silas Boone, who'd helped her without judgment, about Cal Harker, building a life in Denver with his wife and child, about everyone who'd ever made the choice to stop fighting and start healing. The sun was setting as she reached town, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Children played in the streets. Families gathered for dinner. The ordinary miracle of life continuing, despite loss and pain and grief. Mara stopped at the edge of town and looked back at the mountains. Somewhere out there was the woman she'd been, the ghost hunter, relentless and hollow. But that woman had made a choice in a gun shop 5 years ago, had lowered her weapon and walked away. And in doing so, had given birth to this woman, this teacher, landlady, librarian, friend, this person who was learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to be human again. The scar on her face would never go away. It was a permanent reminder of Cal Harker's knife and the choices that had led to that moment. But she'd stopped seeing it as a mark of shame. Now it was just part of her story. A visible reminder that she'd survived, had changed, had chosen differently. She touched it lightly, then let her hand fall. Tomorrow she'd teach her students about poetry. Tomorrow she'd help Helen with the accounts at the store. Tomorrow she'd organize the new shipment of books at the library. Tomorrow she'd wake up and choose life again. And the day after that. And the day after that. For as long as she had left, she'd keep choosing, keep building, keep becoming someone worthy of the second chance she'd been given. The ghost hunter was dead. But Mara Vale, imperfect, scarred, trying, was finally, truly alive. She turned away from the mountains and walked toward the warm lights of town, toward dinner with friends, toward the ordinary, extraordinary life she was still learning to live. Behind her, the sun set on her past. Ahead, the future waited with all its uncertain possibility, and for the first time in 15 years, Mara walked toward it without fear.